Well, Zelenskyy doesn't want peace and the EU don't want peace. Zelenskyy doesn't want peace because he's frightened of what will happen when peace does come. And the EU doesn't want it because EU leaders have invested far too much in supporting Ukraine during this war, and it will be seen as a military defeat. And if Zelenskyy does reject this deal or calls it to collapse, there's a chance that Trump won't just stop support for Ukraine, he'll stop intelligence sharing, which will cripple Ukraine. And you mentioned in your comments earlier Seversk, which fell in about a week. Seversk has been attacked by the Russians probably 13 or 14 times during this war, and the Ukrainians have handed them their hat each time. But that position collapsed. The Ukrainian army is on the verge of collapse. They have 300,000 deserters at the moment. That's 4 times the size of the British army. And this is all going to end in disaster.
What do you make of Mark Galeotti's, he's written a piece in the Sunday Times today, the most likely thing to end the Ukraine war, exhaustion. It's exhaustion on both sides, and it's not as if the Russian economy is doing particularly well either. It built their whole economy around the war, and apparently GDP has only been increasing by 1% in the last year. So they've also got their challenges too. You're right to point out that there's mass desertion going on the Ukrainian front line, which no one really wants to talk about, and also that thousands of young Ukrainians have fled to the West because they don't want to serve on the front line.
I've never witnessed so much blatant propaganda as I've seen from this. There are groups that map the battle maps from both sides and do comparisons. You do geolocations of where movement is happening that come from images of like flag raising or actual battles. And the image that we're provided in the West is so divorced from reality, it's shocking. If you listen to the Telegraph's podcast, you'd be wondering why we aren't currently sitting in Moscow sipping champagne. So I take with a great deal of hesitation that any problems the Russians will have with their economy will prevent them from continuing the war. Russia is bound and determined not to allow Ukraine to join NATO.
Yes.
If they join NATO, they're 350 kilometres away from Moscow. Yeah. That's not going to happen.
But Simon, they've made this very clear. So if you go back to the start of this war, whether you take it at face value or not, right? I mean, the Russians have been very open. Putin's been very open. He does not want Ukraine to be in the Western sphere of influence. He does not want NATO, a so-called defensive inverted commas alliance, on his border. He doesn't want this. And he wants people definitely in the Donbass region to be part of Russia. So he wants land as well. None of these things are going to be achieved with this peace plan. So, I mean, on the basis of that, a basis for peace has to be entered into a negotiation where you don't get everything you want. But at least there's a recognition of why you started the war in the first place. I mean, this is completely and utterly tin-eared.
It is, but I mean, I to be honest, I don't think Putin is interested in land. He's interested in the people that are on that land, who are largely Russian speakers. Most of East Ukraine, a large percentage of the population, are effectively Russian or Russian speakers. And, you know, that's where this conflict began. That's what led to the Minsk II agreement, which was, as Angela Merkel admitted, was just a project to buy time for Ukraine to rearm. I would say this, and I don't think I've apart from Colonel Douglas Macgregor, the former U.S. military colonel, I haven't had anyone else say this, but it's the truth, that neutral Ukraine is in our best interest as well, NATO and Europe's best interest, because then, you know, any Russian attack would have to, you know, travel across vast distances, which the Russian army is not equipped to do, if it was ever to pose a threat to the majority of NATO.
Yeah, I mean, this is Western hubris, though. The whole neutrality of Ukraine argument went out the window back in 2008, where this carrot was dangled of NATO membership to Ukraine. Simon, hold on the line for a second, will you? Just hold on, because I want to bring in Paul. I want to bring you back. Paul in Upminster. Good afternoon, Paul. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Ali. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year to you as well. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
I served in the British Army, Ali. Now, does nobody getting this point? Who started this war? Whose war is it? It's Putin's war. Nobody else started the war. And would we give up London? Would we just hand London over to somebody and then invade in force? Would Trump hand over Texas? He wouldn't. So why are we asking this man to give up land and the people of Ukraine who have fought gallantly?
Yeah, so we don't have to ask them to give up land, so the war can continue, and it will continue. Let me ask you, Paul, about the specifics of this proposal, as we understand it, that Zelensky is going to be discussing in Florida with Trump today for a demilitarized economic zone, which is policed by Ukrainians. I mean, given whether you agree with the war or not, and you clearly, I understand your point, it was a war that Russia started on this thing. I mean, this is a non-starter for a peace agreement, Paul, isn't it?
Of course it is.
So
Absolutely,
why is he doing it? So why is he playing Trump then? Why is he bothering getting on the plane? Why is he wasting everyone's time?
Well, he shouldn't be getting on the plane.
So
he
he's
shouldn't
humouring
be asking
him.
Trump.
So he's humouring him.
Trump. Well, whether he's humouring him or not, Trump could end this war tomorrow.
How?
Because Putin is petrified of America. He's petrified of America getting involved in the war properly.
They're not interested in getting involved, Paul.
No, of course they're not. No, of course not. NATO, without America, could finish off Russia within 4 days. They have the air superiority. They have the weapons to do it.
Yeah, but not without America. They can't.
They can.
Well, why aren't they then?
Because they don't want to. Nobody wants a war, Ali. Okay.
Yeah, but
nobody wants a war on their doorstep.
Yeah, but then, Paul. But you see, this is highly irresponsible, isn't it? So European leaders, based on what you're saying, are entertaining Zelensky, going around with this 20-point plan, waving it in Trump's face, which is not a basis for a peace agreement at all, because he wants to continue the war. Even you're accepting that it's not a basis for a peace agreement, and there shouldn't be a peace agreement. So why are they not just being open about the fact? But they're not also giving him air support and all the things he needs to win the war either. So what are the Europeans playing at, Paul?
What should happen is Trump and all the leaders should say to Putin, get the hell out of there now, and then he could have a referendum on the Donbass region, whether they wanted to be Russian or whether they wanted to be Ukraine.
Ukraine's never going to allow a referendum on that, are they?
Well, at the moment, no, I don't think so. I don't think the Ukrainian people are going to back down and accept the deal.
Do you think that Ukraine should be part of NATO and the EU?
No, I'm not saying they should join NATO. No.
Why not?
We signed an agreement. We signed an agreement because I believe it is too close to Russia and it is prodding Russia.
Yeah, but Paul, okay. Hold on a second. Simon, what do you make of this argument that Paul's making?
Well, firstly, I'd say that I thank Paul for his service. Yes. I know serving in the British Army is always challenging. We believe lots of lies. They talk about 3.4 million NATO members of the NATO military. Well, if you take the US and Turkey out of that, we're down to about 2 million. How many of those troops can be deployed? If the British Army was to be moved lock, stock and barrel to fight the Russians tomorrow, how long would their ammunition last? How many shells, how many missiles do we have in reserve? We've given all our heavy artillery to the Ukrainians. We are deluded. NATO and Europe hasn't been this weak ever in its history. And it's about time you wake up to that. I mean, the idea of a NATO intervention winning the war, that's just not going to, that just wouldn't happen.
They are investing a lot more now in defence, though, Simon, to be fair. I mean, the Germans have removed the debt brake. They're investing heavily in the military, but that will take some years to come to fruition, right? But there has been a galactic wake-up call and a kick up the backside, and they're responding, the Europeans.
The UK cannot make artillery barrels. We've been able to do that since 1371. 300 ships have to arrive in and be unloaded in our ports each day, and the Royal Navy would struggle to escort a single convoy of 30. Yeah. If we went to war with the Russians wouldn't need to invade us. They could starve us to death.
Okay, Simon, Paul.
We are totally unprepared for war. America has one factory making tanks. Okay. It has one factory making artillery barrels. It has one factory making high explosives, and that had an accident this year.
Okay, Simon, Paul.
Well, it just seems that people in this country, in my country, that I did love, I mean, I wouldn't go to war for our government.
Wow.
I'd go to war for the people of this country.
Former army officer saying this.
I'd go to war for the people around me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go to war for this government. They're too weak. They're far too weak. But We seem to be pandering up to Putin. That's all we seem to be doing.
But Paul,
let him have what he wants. Let him have the land.
Yeah, but
NATO and the West did not start this war.
Yeah, but
it's Putin's war because he wants the USSR.
That's not true. That's not true.
Of course it's true. You're another Russian sympathiser.
I'm not a Russian sympathiser. I want my country to look after itself. And the last thing I want to do is to watch body bags of our young men coming back from defending the Baltic states. Because that's what will happen. Our army is full of brave men who are led by people who could not defeat Iraqis and Afghans in sandals. And you want to put that up against an army that's been fighting for 4 years, the first proper 21st century war, with an army of less than 100,000 men, if you include every single reserve. That's not patriotism, that's stupidity.
I don't want to put our men up a bit. I don't want to put our men into a war.
The first rule of war is you don't fight a war, you are doomed to lose. The most important thing about a war is that you win it, whatever it takes.
Okay, Simon. Paul?
Well, Putin can't win the war, can he? He's invaded Ukraine and he hasn't been able to win it yet.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But then, Paul, is your conclusion to all of this, and it's been a spirited discussion, that Zelenskyy is playing for time? Because what other conclusion can one come to? Because you agree with me, right? That's not a basis of a serious negotiation for peace. So what's he trying to do here?
No, I don't believe it is. It's not a serious negotiation. No, it's not.
So what's he doing? What's he doing wasting everyone's time going to Mar-a-Lago then? Let the guy play golf, for heaven's sake.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't believe he should be going there anyway. I mean, I just believe that the countries should get together. They should make Putin leave Ukraine. And we need to have a proper peace deal. All right.